Hello my friends, and welcome to this next video in this series where we shall be talking more about JavaScript functions. So in previous video, we were saying that we can declare a function using the function keyword, and we write the function name, for example, name printer, and then give the parentheses and then the curly braces. And then within the block of the function, we can write statement that we want this function to execute when we call the function. So let's imagine that we want this function to log a name to the console. Let's say we want it to log Dominic, like so. So let's call this function name printer right here, and then save the file and check out our browser's console to see if Dominic gets logged onto the console. Right here, you can see that Dominic has been logged onto the console. Remember, there is always a live refresh when we make a change on our VS Code, either on the home.html file or on the scripting.js file. And in fact, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pull my VS Code and my browser side by side so that we can see both pages at the same time. So right here, my VS Code is on the left side and my browser is on the right side. And by the way, if you don't see your port or the live server right here, and you're looking for the live server, what you can do is just to right click on this status bar. This bar right here is the status bar. So you can right click on the status bar if you're using a Windows, and then you can press Ctrl on your keyboard and click your mouse if you're using a Mac, and then it opens up this right here. So you can search for the live server and toggle it on, and from there on you'll be able to access your live server. So right here we see that Dominic has been logged onto the console. Now, what if instead of providing this Dominic as a raw string here, we want to accept a parameter here. We want to give this name printer function a parameter, that is while declaring the function. All right, so I'm going to say fname. I'm going to give it an fname parameter, and that means that this name printer should accept an argument, right? But first of all, within the function, what do we want to do with this fname? Remember, whenever you give a function a parameter, you should make sure that you use that parameter within the function. So let's assume that I want to log the fname to the console. So I'm going to type fname right here. And then when I call the function, I have to provide a value for it, all right? So I can now provide Dominic, like so. When I save this, you see that there's a fast refresh, right? Because of our live server. And then Dominic is still getting logged onto the console. Good. But what if instead of providing a raw string right here as an argument to this name printer function, we want to store Dominic in a variable and instead give name printer that variable. So we want to say something like let's name 1 equals Dominic, like so. And when I call this name printer function, I'm now going to pass the name1 variable to it like this. So when I save this, you see that Dominic is still getting logged to the console. And if I change it to anything, let's say I change it to Alex and save, now you see that Alex is getting logged onto the console. Now, the next thing I want to tell you is that when we change the value of a parameter within the function, remember, a parameter is what we pass to the function when declaring it. So when we change that value inside of the function, it doesn't affect the original value we passed as an argument right here. So if, for example, instead of this function, I change fname to become a berry instead, this is going to log fname to the console, but it's going to log a berry instead of name1 variable here, which is Alex. So let me save this, and you can see that a berry is still getting logged onto the console. Alex is no longer getting logged onto the console. But changing this fname variable within the function does not affect the value of name1 right here. So what happened is that when we pass name1 as an argument right here, we're just passing the copy of this variable. That means we're just passing Alex, right? We just copy Alex, or we just look at Alex and say, okay, just be Alex, all right? It doesn't change or affect the name1 variable right here, as we change fname instead of the function. So if we try to access name1, even within the function, we're still going to get Alex printed. So if I say console.log name1 like this and save, we see that first of all, fname is a berry. So we log fname to the console, and so a berry is here. And then name1 is still Alex. So Alex is still getting logged to the console. The point is that we passed a variable name1 to this name printer function. And the variable name1 is Alex, right? So this Alex value was just passed right here. It doesn't affect the name1 variable. It doesn't affect the original variable. So the name1 will always remain Alex, even though we tried to change fname to a berry within the function. And so this phenomenon in JavaScript is what we call pass by value. And that means that when we give a parameter to a function and we change the value of that parameter in the function like we did on line 3, it is not going to affect the global code. In this case, we're passing name1 as the value to this name printer function. So it's not going to affect or change the name1 variable, which was outside of this function. All right. Another thing to note is that functions can return a value. And usually, instead of a function, we can return a value using the return keyword. How does that work? So let's say we want to calculate the square of a number and write a function that calculates the square of a number. So that function name will be called square. And I'm going to give the parentheses, and then I'm going to give the curly braces. Now, this square will accept a parameter. So I'm going to give it num parameter. And what do I want to do with this num parameter? I want to say num multiplied by num. So this right here will give me the square of a number, right? The square of a number is the number multiplied by itself. So let me store this thing in a variable. So I'm going to say let var equals num multiplied by num. All right. So now val we hold num multiplied by num. First of all, let me call this function square and then pass an argument of 4. We all know that the square of 4 is 16, right? That is 4 multiplied by 4. So when we pass this 4 for this number, now 4 multiplied by 4 will give us 16, and 16 gets stored inside of this val variable right here. So we can return this val by saying return val, like so. So now when we call this square 4, what do we get? Let's save, and we'll see that we get nothing on the console, right? And that's because we've not console logged anything. But right here, this square of 4 is having a value. It's having a value because a value was returned from it. And what was returned for it? This val right here, which contains 4 multiplied by 4, right? When we call the function, of course. So I can store this in a variable. I can say let's square 4 equals square 4. So this square 4 variable is going to hold the square of 4. So if I console log square 4 to the console, we will see that 16 will get printed on the console. Let me console.log square 4 and save. So right now we see that 16 has been logged onto the console. Also, instead of even assigning to a variable, we can also directly log square 4 to the console. So let me take this out and replace it with this one and save. So you can see 16 is still right there on a console. So that means a function can return a value. So this is how we use it. We say return, we use the return keyword right here and return whatever value that we want it to return. So whatever value we return from a function will be the value that that function has when we call the function right here. So we call the function, passing it 4 as an argument, and so it evaluated to 16. If we passed 3 as an argument, this will evaluate to 9 because the square of 3 is 9. If we passed 5 as an argument, it will evaluate to 25 because the square of 5 is 25. Now the next thing that I want to show us is function expression. And what is a function expression? Function expression is just writing a function without a name, actually. So normally when we declare a function, we say function and then we give the function name, right? For example, square, and then we give the parentheses and then the curly braces. But in function expression, we'd say something like function and then brackets or parentheses and then curly braces like this. This is a function expression right here. And what happens is that we can usually assign it to a variable. So we can say const squares equals this right here. So this is how a function expression is written. Of course, we can expand inside of the block like this. So if you look close, you can see that when we said function, there was no function name, unlike the way we have it here. So this is a function expression right here. And it works in similar way to this kind of function declaration. So right here is a function declaration, right here is a function expression. And then it works the same way. So for example, this function can accept a parameter of num, all right? And we can say console.log num. Let's assume we want to just console log the num to the console, right? So we can say console.log and then num like this. So when we call this function, how do we call it? We call it with the name of this variable, right? So we can say squares and then pass it 4, for example. So when we save this, we see that 4 has been logged onto the console. And in fact, we can also say, instead of just saying num, of course we can say num multiplied by num. All right, and so when I say we're going to get 16 logged onto the console, we can also return it. Instead of logging into the console, we can return the square of the num. So we can say let var equals num multiplied by num, and then on the next line we can return var like this. So now when we call this function with this squares, of course, this squares function with value of 4, of course this one will have 16, right? So when we save, we have 16, but then it doesn't get logged to the console. So we can do something like console.log squares like this. So when we log this, we can now see it on the console. We can also store it in a variable, right? So we can say let's square 4 equals square of 4, and then we can do anything we want with this square 4, because right now this square 4 is having the value of 16. So if I log square 4 to the console, console.log square 4, we still get 16 right here. So this is how a function expression works. And one of the useful things about function expression is that we can pass it as an argument to a function. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to clear all of this. Now let's assume that we have a function right here, a normal function, right, with a function name that says num printer, and then open my parentheses and then the curly braces like this. So let's assume that this num printer function, we have some parameters within it, and we can provide function. So let me use funct like this. You can call it anything you want. In fact, I'm going to call my own functs, right? And then maybe accept a name like this. And we want to do something with this funct and name. This font here that I'm writing, I want it to be a function. And this name right here could be any name, maybe Dominic or Ibere or Alex or Vivian, names like that. All right, so that means when we call this num_printer function, we should pass it a function. And then we should also pass it a name. So what do I want to do instead of this function? I want to say functs. I want to now use functs instead of this function. And I want to pass name to it, name, all right? So now let me call this function right here. This is num_printer function right here. So since we provided functs right here, we said that this functs right here should be a function, right? Because of course, if you see within the function itself, within this num_printer function, we use funct as a function because we called it right here and we pass a name to it. Therefore, when calling this num_printer, we should provide a function right here. And so one way of doing it is we can use function expression. So we can immediately say function and then open the parentheses and then curly braces like this. So if you look closely, you see that this function has no name, right? So this is a function expression right here. And then comma, we can give any name right here. We can give Dominic, for example. This is a function expression, right? So, and if you notice, this function right here accepts something, okay? The function itself accepts something. In this case, it accepted the name variable that was passed right here as parameter during the declaration of this non-printf function. So that means this function, while declaring it, we're going to give a parameter to it. So I can say something like name1, just any name you want, right? And then what do we want to do? In fact, let me make my Visual Studio Code a little bit bigger. Let me expand it. And then I can say alert, give an alert, right? And I'm going to say name1 is great. So what is happening here? Right here, I used a function expression. I immediately defined a function here using function expression. And then I want the function to give an alert with the name that we passed to this function. In this case, name right here, right? And that name is Dominic. So you can see Dominic is this name right here. And it was passed to this function. So that's what this function is going to use to give an alert that says name is great. So in this case, it's going to say Dominic is great. So let me minimize my VS Code window again. So as soon as I save, I get an alert that says Dominic is great right here. Now, because this code can be a bit confusing, I'm going to try to explain it one more time. Okay, so we know what a function expression is, right? Let me take this one out. So what we're doing here is that we have a non-printf function that takes two parameters. One is a function, one is a name that can be any string. So it means that when calling this function, this non-printf function, we should pass a function to it as an argument, and we should also pass a name that will be a string to it as a second argument when calling the function, all right? But then within this non-printf function, we want to do something. Remember, any parameter you pass to a function, you should use that parameter within the function. There should be something that the parameters should be doing within your function. So in this case, I want this name to be passed to the function and then something to be done. So what we can do now is when we call the function, this non-printf function right here, we now need to pass a function right here. We need to pass a function as the first argument, and we need to pass a name, which could be any name, Dominic, Vivian, or anything, as a second argument. So one way to do this to be clearer is that we can define a separate function. Let's say function namer, for example, open parenthesis, and then curly braces like this. So this namer function takes in a parameter that's going to be, let's say, fname, okay? And then I want it to give an alert that says fname is great. So now this namer is a function, right? So when calling this non-printer, we can now say namer like this, right? And then comma, and then we can say Dominic. Remember, this is non-printer, right? So this namer is a function, and you can see this is a function here. So what is this namer function going to do? What this namer function is going to do is that when we call this non-printer function, this Dominic will pass to the namer right here. So fname becomes namer. So we'll see that we'll get an alert that says Dominic is great since we passed Dominic right here. So when we save this and view on our browser's console, we still get that Dominic is great, okay? So this is one way of doing it. But instead, one thing we can do is to immediately write a function expression inside here. So we don't need this one here. We don't need to define a separate function. We can just immediately write a function expression. And how do we write a function expression? We just say function. It doesn't have to have a name. Then we can give this parenthesis and then the curly braces. We need to do something inside of this function. And what do we need to do? We need to give an alert, call an alert function, and then we're going to say something right here. So what do we want to say? Right here, we're going to provide a parameter for this function, because remember, we're defining a function here. In this case, it's a function expression. So we can say fname, we can give it any name we want, and then alert, we're going to say fname is great. So this is what I did initially, all right? So it's going to use this fname right here to say fname is great. And what is this fname? this f name is Dominic, all right? Because remember, when we call non-printer right here, this name is passed to the function we provided here. So Dominic will be passed to this f name. And so when we save and preview on our browser, right here, we still get Dominic is great. And if we close and refresh again, we still get Dominic is great. So this is one of the useful things about function expression. So this, my friends, is how function expression works. We can easily pass it when a function requires another function. So we can pass it as an argument to another function, which is what we did right here. In the next video, let's take a look at scope in JavaScript. See you in the next video. Please, my friends, like my videos and subscribe to my channel. It will go a long way in helping me to create videos like this.